Good afternoon, everybody. It's your boy, Pigskin Pete. Welcome back to HowardsRock.net with the fifth quarter show with myself and my man, Spencer from Rover Sports. How you doing, Spencer?
I'm doing well, Pigskin. I'm doing really well because I think really I was like the first YouTuber, maybe, can you say, to get behind like PJ Fleck and Minnesota football?
I will give you that credit for that. Yes, I even believe that I was making fun of you a little bit before the season started when you were saying that PJ Fleck could possibly be a contender. Not PJ Fleck, but PJ Fleck and Minnesota could possibly be contenders for the playoff. I know I laughed at you. I think Uncle Lou laughed at you. But
Yeah.
now you're laughing at us. Now it's still not written in the books. I mean, Minnesota. Listen, they're having a great season. They're 9-0 for the first time since whatever 1940 something. But they haven't played really any good teams until last week. So now we can say they played a great team. They played Penn State and beat them handily at home. But now Minnesota really has to show what they're about, right? So coming off an emotional win at home in Minneapolis, they have to go on the road this week to Iowa. Then they have to play Wisconsin. And then they probably most likely have to play and beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championships. This is an uphill battle for PJ Fleck and the Golden Gophers, but they have been extremely impressive. I will give you that.
Well, yeah, they're ahead of schedule, and
Yeah.
the great thing about being a Minnesota fan is that, or supporting the team, is that they focus on themselves. They focus on improving every single week. So hopefully this isn't just like a 1 year thing where Minnesota's just really good this year, because they have had the schedule. And the cool thing about Minnesota is that I knew like that Fresno State game in overtime, or when they played against South Dakota State or Georgia Southern, when they were barely beating those teams. I said those wins, even though they're ugly wins, Minnesota is still going to get better from those wins.
Right.
Minnesota is still they improve every single week, and that's what they focus on in their program. Is they don't really worry about the opponent, they worry about themselves. So
Yeah.
and that's why, like, when they were beating Fresno State, like, if you don't follow the Gophers close enough, you think, okay, this team only beat Georgia Southern by 4 points. How are they going to beat the fourth ranked team in the country? But that's just the joy of watching your team over the year improve. And I'm sure, being a Clemson fan, Pete, I mean, what was the win with Dabo Swinney that like kind of started Clemson? Like, what was the game like? Even if it wasn't a great opponent, like, when did Dabo like start to have start to gain momentum? Because the cool thing about rooting for Minnesota is that Fleck is staying at Minnesota. I firmly believe it, and I want him to build it into a power.
Yeah, it's hard for me to pinpoint an exact win that did that. I mean, probably the most notable win was the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl game. The Taj Boyd team. I was at that game. It was on New Year's Eve in Atlanta, where they played LSU, and again came down to the very last play of the game, 4th and 16, very famous play in Clemson folklore. It was 4th and 16. Clemson was down to LSU. There was only, I think there was less than a minute left on the clock, or somewhere inside of 2 minutes. He completes a pass on 4th and 16 for a first down to DeAndre Hopkins. They go on down and to score and win the game at the last second. That's probably the most notable, and a lot of Clemson fans will put that at the front of when Clemson turned their program around, because after they beat LSU that year, they went on to beat pretty much everybody else in front of them. It's from Oklahoma to Ohio State to you've seen Alabama, Notre Dame. I mean, it's just been.
But I think with Jameis Winston, he still would. I think he still beat you guys like all three. Did he win all 3 games against Clemson?
No, I don't think so.
What was the game with Deshaun Watson where he got hurt at Florida State? Did you end up winning that? It was a close game, I remember.
Trying to remember.
It was his freshman year, Deshaun Watson.
I think we lost. Yeah, we lost that game.
But
that was the game. That was the game that Florida State ran the score up on Clemson. It was like 50 something to 17 or something.
I thought it was a close first half, but the bowl game must have came this season where I do remember Jameis Winston going into Clemson and a huge Saturday night game, and Taj Boyd was still there, and Florida State got the best of Clemson that night. I do remember that.
Yeah. Taj Boyd, I think, was maybe 2-2 or 1-2 versus Florida State. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. But
right,
Deshaun Watson had the better of Florida State every year he was there, I think. He might have lost his freshman year when he was hurt. But I know he won the 2 after that, because the 2 after that, he was in a national championship game, so he had to have.
Right.
But you know, I draw a lot of comparisons between PJ Fleck and Dabo Swinney, and people will laugh at me when I say that. But when I listen to PJ Fleck talk, he sounds a lot like Dabo Swinney. He's preaching the same type of message. He's a very positive guy, a motivational type of speaker. And I feel like, you know, unfortunately for PJ Fleck in Minnesota, I mean, they're having a great year, don't get me wrong. And he may stay there a long time, and he may end up being a legendary coach in Minnesota. I would not doubt that by any means. But, I mean, look, Dabo Swinney's in the heart of recruiting country in South Carolina. He's recruiting from North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, you know, all the surrounding southern states. Minnesota, it's a little bit harder for them to recruit those type of players. But I think they're similar type of coaches. And I feel like, and I tweeted this out the other day, I said that if you look at the way PJ Fleck talks, when he talks to the media and talks to his team, he has a very similar message to Dabo Swinney. And this, if you're an athletic director out there, because every single year we see big time programs going after the next big time coach, right? We're seeing it now. We saw Florida State fire Willie Taggart, Arkansas fires Chad Morris, and USC is probably going to fire Clay Helton, and there'll be countless other teams that are looking for a coach, and they always go after the big names, the big name, the big name, the big name. And I always say, and I'll continue to say, go after the guy that's got the passion and it has the message that can resonate with the team. This is Dabo Swinney. This is PJ Fleck. I mean, PJ Fleck came from Western Michigan. The guy at Kansas State, all right, he came from North Dakota State, an FCS team. You know, granted, a very good FCS team, but Kansas State could have went out there and got themselves a Les Miles. They could have went out there and got themselves some other big name coach who's washed up and at the end of his career, but they went after a young guy. And look at Kansas State. Kansas State's a 10 times better team than they have been for the past few years under an aging Bill Snyder. So I feel like this should be the exception, this should be the rule, not the exception, is what I'm saying. Going after a coach like a Dabo Swinney, like a PJ Fleck, this is the new era of coaches that win.
I think but I would push back a little bit in that I just think that Dabo and PJ are so difficult to find. And a lot of time, I think they're two of the best, because I'll give you an example of a coach that's kind of like a PJ Fleck, and that is Butch Jones.
I knew you were gonna say that.
Because Butch Jones has the sayings, and the sayings kind of only work if you're rolling. You know, the sayings are only great if you can back it up. I'm sure Charlie Strong had a lot of PJ Fleckian qualities. I'll tell you another. Chad Morris actually, ironically, was very positive, especially in the beginning at Arkansas. And I'm disappointed that the Morris thing didn't work out. And I guess I can go off on a Morris tangent, but, you know, Fleck is just special, you know, because Fleck, he chose to build this thing with a young core, not in terms of like transferring players. And it's really all culture with him. He's a social studies teacher. He's not the X's and O's guy, and he delegates the X's and O's really well. And the great thing about Fleck is that he dreams big. He thinks the championship should be a part of the expectation. And that's what's the coolest thing. Like, he doesn't just say, we're playing in the Big Ten, we're going to go win 9 or 10 games like a Oklahoma State. You know?
Here's where I'll push back. When you compare a PJ Fleck or a Dabo Swinney to Butch Jones or Chad Morris. Yeah, look, I know that the positive speak and all that, you know, sort of cheesy stuff that people say. A lot of coaches can do that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying, what separates Dabo Swinney and PJ Fleck from these other type of coaches that you just mentioned, is that it's not about football with them. The football winning on the field is a byproduct of what the culture is there. In other words, PJ Fleck will tell you, and I've heard him say in an interview today, that since he's got to Minnesota, they have the highest GPA. Everybody, 85 scholarships, 85 players over the 3.0 grade point average. Same thing with Dabo Swinney. He set records with the GPA records for Clemson there. And PJ Fleck also said, we know there's a bunch of great 4- and 5-star players out there, and we would like to get them. But if they don't fit our program, if they don't fit what we do, we don't want them. So that is the difference. And that's a Dabo Swinney message. It's always been a Dabo Swinney message. We'll get the best players, but if you don't fit our program, the way we do things, then we don't want you. That is the difference between PJ Fleck, Dabo Swinney, and then the other guys like Chad Morris and Butch Jones.
It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. And then I think that there's very good coaches that schematically are elite. I would say Jimbo Fisher is like the opposite. The GPAs are all over the place, but he's a freaking good coach. He really is. I think Saban's gotten better at GPA, stuff like that. But of course, Petrino is the ultimate example. Really good coach. But he doesn't really focus on like the culture aspects. And you got to also have a patient fan base, Pete. Like, say PJ Fleck went to Tennessee, it would be a bad fit. Or say PJ went to Florida. It's good. It's good for Dabo and PJ to be. Minnesota was perfect for PJ because it's an underdog job. And, perfect spot.
I disagree. I think that Dabo's coaches like Swinney and Fleck, who are the real deal, I mean, they're the epitome of what we're talking about. I think they could go to any major program and make it a success. I think Dabo Swinney could go to Alabama or
even
Texas
USC, because at USC you'd be forced to you'd be pressured. No. Recruiting rankings would be pressured.
Doesn't matter. This is the elite type of coach I'm talking about. Is they can go anywhere and bring their message along with them. I really believe that. I believe that. You know what? I don't think he'll take the job, because why would he? But if PJ Fleck were to somehow say, all right, I'm going to go to Florida State. They want me and they're going to pay me whatever, $10 million a year. I'll go there, which isn't going to happen. But if he did, I think that PJ Fleck would turn Florida State around in a couple of years. I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, he's that special.
Yeah.
But the good news is about the coaches of the programs is that would be hypocritical. So they're truly not doing it. They can win anything. You can win anything at Minnesota and Clemson. You know,
so
Power 5.
How do you see these rankings that came out last night? Minnesota's the first week of the rankings were at 17, which I thought was a travesty. And I listen, I could go on for an hour about how I feel like that Minnesota was disrespected. I realize that they haven't had a great schedule. I realize their non-conference schedule is not very good. I realize they had some struggle wins early in the year. But at this point of the year, you know, it's not week 4. It's not week 5. We're going into week 12 here in college football. We're in the middle of November. And for Minnesota to be undefeated, one of the few undefeated teams left in the country, for them to be put at 17, which is the lowest that an undefeated Power 5 team has ever been ranked in the first college football playoff rankings, was disrespectful. And now that they beat Penn State, who the committee themselves ranked number 4, I think they had to kind of eat their crow and put them up there at, I think they put them at 8. I had them at 7, but I think they should be higher. Listen, fair is fair. Minnesota should be 5 or 4. That's the way I feel. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I truly don't get necessarily that mixed up with the polls. I think the polls are actually important for your Kansas States that are trying to get to a bowl game and do some work in the 20s and 15s, but it's only going to matter at the end. And with the four teams, it pretty much I think it is going to work itself out.
Yeah, right. I agree.
They do value strength of schedule. And now the committee also, you should value how a team is playing. And Minnesota was winning a lot of games. So again, I'm not outraged at all, Pete, because guess what? If Baylor takes care of business, it doesn't matter at all. Baylor will jump home.
Right. I'm not outraged either. And you're right. It'll work.
But I actually, Pete, that the polls come out every. I like that the polls come out every week, even though they're dead wrong. I give them credit though.
Right, but it's not polls. It's the actual playoff rankings. So the AP poll is a different story. That's meaningless. But the college football playoffs do matter. I mean, for some of these teams, like you said, it means what bowl game they're going to play in. It could be the difference between playing in a Sugar Bowl and playing in the Capital One Bowl. I mean, that's how important it is. So I do take the playoff polls or the playoff rankings seriously. And you're right, it will work itself out. I mean, all these teams in the top even 12, the vast majority of them, if they have hopes of getting into the college football playoff, being in the top 4, they have to win out. So a lot of these teams are going to have to play each other, whether it's in the regular season that remains or in some sort of a conference championship situation. You have Utah and Oregon. They're going to have to play each other. You have Penn State and Ohio State. They're going to have to play each other. Minnesota possibly has to play an Ohio State or a Penn State. LSU is going to have to play Georgia. So there's a bunch of scenarios. And like you said, it'll work itself all out. My point is that, first of all, look, here's the problem I have with this. How in God's name can Baylor be ranked lower than Oklahoma at this point? Tell me that. Explain that to me.
Like I said, I'm just going to say the rationale that they're using, I don't agree with it. It's because you have Lincoln Riley, you have Jalen Hurts.
I don't care.
It's past success, It's the success.
They say that they don't talk about past. That's what they say.
Yeah, I don't. Well, guess what? The Houston game and UCLA is playing a little bit better, but those are not great non-conference. So I don't have a good answer for you.
No, but here's the thing. Oklahoma.
Maybe the Texas win is like weighed so high or something.
Oklahoma
played Texas.
All right, so Oklahoma and Baylor both play in the Big 12, right?
Yes.
So they both have pretty bad out-of-conference schedules that they can't really hang a special win out of conference on. One has a loss, one doesn't. As a matter of fact, Baylor beat Kansas State by like 3 touchdowns, and Oklahoma lost to Kansas State. So there's the common opponent right there. But yet Baylor's ranked like 3 spots lower than Oklahoma. So why? So I don't know. See, that's where they lose me. Is that if you want to talk about strength of schedule and say this team has a better strength of schedule so far, so we're going to put them ahead, then I can get behind that, even if I don't agree with it. But Oklahoma doesn't have a better strength of schedule than Baylor does, and they have a loss and Baylor doesn't. So I don't understand that. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about this week. Now, obviously, well, to cap off last week, we saw LSU go into Tuscaloosa, beat Alabama, and I know people are going to say, well, Tua was hurt, and he might not have been 100%. I'll give you that. But at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that it was Alabama's offense that lost that game. I mean, Tua played great. Tua had 4 touchdowns of over 400 yards passing. So it wasn't Tua. It was Alabama's defense that let them down. Or if you want to look at it on the positive side for LSU and Joe Burrow, it was their offense that won that game. So, I mean, clearly LSU is the better team top to bottom than Alabama is.
I would say yes, because even if the game was at Tiger Stadium, LSU's defense is going to play better. And you know what? LSU was up by like 2 touchdowns. They played that stupid coverage there, that kind of last touchdown that Alabama had, the 90-yard touchdown, right. Made it closer for an onside kick. But this was really the first game where, and I guess you can go back to the Clemson National Championship, maybe Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl in 2014 or whenever, 2016, whatever it was. Alabama's defense was just pitiful. They just got mauled over by LSU's offense, and that's it. You know what, Pete? If you want to win against great teams, you can't allow them to score 50 points at your home stadium. Ridiculous. Right,
I agree. And I've been saying this. I feel like the SEC has morphed into something that we're not used to seeing. I think that Georgia is the only team left in the SEC that has a chance to make the playoffs that is a traditional type of SEC team. Run the ball, dominate the line of scrimmage, play great defense. That's what we're used to seeing out of the SEC over the past 20 years, right? Now we're seeing LSU and Alabama and Florida. Well, Florida's got a pretty good defense, but still, we're seeing them air the ball out. They're looking like a lot like these Big 12 teams, aren't they?
They looked a lot like Big 12 teams, and that's where I give pause to the game was like a classic or. But I'll argue this point. You still have Auburn, you still have Florida, Tennessee plays that style, South Carolina attempts to play the style.
Attempts.
Auburn, South Carolina just has no offense at all. Maybe that's why they're a defensive style. They'll play Appy State, they'll put up 16 points, and Appalachian will put up 19. But I'm gonna eat crow on that Will Muschamp. He's probably gonna get fired. I mean, it looking like he's not even gonna make it out of this year.
Yeah, he will.
You think he will?
Yeah, he'll be back next year.
Yeah, he has no OC there. That's their problem there. But I think that Alabama, Pete, I just think that they graduated a lot of players to the NFL. And I'll tell you this, if Nick Saban.
They've been doing that for 10 years. What's the excuse this year, though?
This is like somehow these players are just the worst defensive. Maybe it's LSU changing everything. Guess what, Pete? I think that Alabama, they're losing their identity. If they play like this next year, Pete, Nick Saban's going to not be the king of college anymore. He's got to get that line of scrimmage game back. Because Ohio State and Clemson, they play the way that Alabama used to play because they have dominant defenses. They play nice running the football. And Alabama's a fraud this year. There's no doubt about it.
But see, you got to understand, I heard that last year. When Clemson beat Alabama 44-16 in the championship game, we heard, this was just a transition year. They lost a bunch of players to the NFL. Now, but what about this year? So there's clearly an issue there. I don't know if it's the players.
They were better last year. You guys were just that good last year.
All right.
Honestly,
well, I honestly think Clemson's better this year than they were last year.
Yeah, and that would not smell well if Alabama snuck in. Which could happen.
Or for anybody, for that matter. All right, so let's move on to.
Are you afraid of the LSU Tigers because that's looking like a playoff game?
Well, first of all, I'm not afraid to play. I mean, Clemson at this point is not afraid to play anybody. So I think afraid is the wrong word. I think out of all the teams actually that I think that would give Clemson the best game or could possibly knock Clemson off in the postseason, I think it would be Ohio State, not LSU. And that's not a knock at LSU. I think it's because Ohio State's a more complete team. I think they have a better offense and defense collectively than LSU does. LSU's got a great offense, but their defense isn't great.
And that's exactly why Ohio State and Clemson are great matchups because you guys are more complete than LSU. But LSU with Joe Burrow is going to win the SEC. And LSU's defense is better than Alabama. So.
And that'll be interesting to see. Listen, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I mean, provided that Ohio State, LSU, and Clemson all make the playoffs, which we probably think they will, right? All the three of those teams, unless there's some sort of major slip up by one of those teams. I think it's compelling to see what the first round matchup would be because if it were Clemson versus LSU in round one, I'd prefer that over Clemson versus Ohio State in round one. I think I'd rather see Ohio State and Clemson in the actual title game to win it all.
Yeah, I mean the interesting thing is LSU. It really comes down to Auburn, Pete, and now we can preview this week. Yes. Auburn has the opportunity to catapult the Pac-12 in every respect because I believe that Alabama, all they have to do is take care of business, and then they play at the Iron Bowl at Auburn. Okay, So I believe that Georgia is not going to beat LSU in the SEC championship, and then Georgia Auburn this week. I actually think Auburn can beat them. I would pick Auburn this week.
Auburn is the most important team in the country for the next 3 weeks. They have the chance to both catapult the Pac-12 or even possibly a Big 12 team into the playoffs. They also have the chance to play spoiler for multiple SEC teams. All this talk about 2 SEC teams possibly getting in the playoffs is certainly possible. But if Auburn beats Alabama and Georgia, then they're done. Alabama's chances are done. Georgia's chances are done. Mm-hmm. Auburn right now, the rest of the country outside of Auburn, Alabama is rooting for Auburn to win these games, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the Pac-12, you're rooting for Auburn. if you're in the Big Ten, you're rooting for Auburn. If you're in any other conference outside of hell, if you're in Alabama, you're rooting for Auburn. Because Alabama's really only chance to backdoor their way into the playoffs at this point is for Auburn to beat Georgia and not beat Alabama,
themselves, but Georgia.
Right.
Georgia, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then I think it really comes down to that Auburn-Alabama game because Oregon doesn't have any wins that are all that good.
They will if they beat Utah in the Pac-12, though. Championship.
Yeah, they'll have the one win. Unfortunately, like Washington State and even the Huskies are not ranked, which really sucks for I think the Huskies are actually really good. I'm kind of surprised they're not in the 25.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, though, Texas is ranked 19. Now, last week, Texas wasn't even in the top 25. And then they moved up to 19 this week.
Yeah, and they barely
Texas is not a good team.
Yeah, that's where it does get important though, the rankings, because
right.
Like say Washington State goes like 7-5 or 8-4 and then you add a top 25. You know, when we look at the two losses, Georgia's loss is clearly the worst loss, but you have Alabama. Alabama's loss to LSU is later in the year. Boy, oh boy, I think Oregon's loss is not bad at all. Especially if Auburn goes 10-2, and that was the first week of the year, and you saw Ohio State lose to Virginia Tech. Isn't it worse that Alabama loses in Week 7? It should be at their home field.
It is, and Alabama's in a similar situation as Clemson. Is that their opponents that are normally good on a year-to-year basis just aren't good this year, so they don't have any good wins to hang their hat on. So they're sort of waiting for chaos around them to wait for teams to lose. Now, Oklahoma and Baylor. At this point in the season, this game this weekend, this might be the biggest game in the country. I know everyone's going to have their eyes on Georgia and Auburn, which is also big, and Minnesota and Iowa, which is also big. But the loser of Oklahoma and Baylor is out of the playoffs. Period. So this is a playoff game for both of these teams. I mean, Oklahoma's already behind the 8 ball because they have a loss, but Baylor is playing for their chance to get in there as well. Baylor goes undefeated and they're 13-0 and they win the Big 12. They're going to get in the playoffs. There's never been a scenario where an undefeated Power 5 team has ever been left out of the playoffs.
There's only one scenario. There's only one scenario.
What?
Well, you're right. You have Baylor, Clemson, and Ohio State and LSU.
If any team in the Power 5, if they go completely undefeated throughout their regular season and win their conference, they're getting in the playoffs. Yeah. So Baylor is playing for their playoff chances this week against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma.
It's interesting. Imagine if they didn't have a Big 12 championship.
Yeah, they probably. That's a good point. And they've added that 2 years ago.
I don't know. I don't know if that's good or bad because you could always use it against them. Then you could put Alabama in over them, maybe. So it's good. It is good, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely good for the Big 12 because they would be definitely screwed this year. Without a Big 12 championship this year, an undefeated Baylor probably could get left out. But they need that championship game to get in there. So
yeah.
So that's a very important game. And I don't really know. I mean, I think Oklahoma's got a better offense, but I think Baylor's got the best defense in the Big 12. And that's going to be a really interesting game. I think Baylor, I know that they've had not a good schedule, and I know that they've had some shaky, very close wins. But Baylor, they're not pushovers. They're not I don't think they're overrated. As a matter of fact, I think they're a little bit underrated. And I would not be surprised if Baylor beat Oklahoma this week.
I would not. I'll actually pick Baylor on the show.
Awesome. Perfect. That's the way we'll end it.
I'll pick Baylor.
I'm with you. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to pick Baylor too. I think Baylor's going to win.
When they go to Texas, I'm just not sure. Man, it'll be fun. It'll be really fun. If Baylor can do this. I mean, I know they just beat TCU. They've looked bad. I don't understand why. Their worst game they've played is West Virginia. They only beat them by 3 points.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible game. At home, only beating that crappy West Virginia team by
Yeah.
3. But I'll tell you when I believed in Baylor. At the beginning of this month, they went to Manhattan like we talked about, and they killed Kansas State. Then you're like, whoa. And then the game, they went to Oklahoma State. That was really impressive.
I know. See, that's
Oklahoma State.
Maybe I'm more old school and more of a purist. I understand everyone has an argument about, there's not really any team in America, no matter how good they are, that can say that they didn't have some sort of struggle win or a closer game against a bad team than they should have had. I mean, Ohio State probably is the only one that can't say that they haven't had a close game. Ohio State's blown everybody out. But everybody else, literally every other team, even LSU, even Alabama, even Clemson, everybody's got this game that was sort of shaky. And so I'm a purist in the way that at this point in the season, like I said at the beginning of this video, at this point in the season, this is when wins have to matter. If you're undefeated and you're a Power 5 team and you've played a Power 5 schedule and you still have not lost a football game, I don't care what's happened. That should be the precedent that's set at this time of the year. Now, I don't know. I realize I'm probably in the minority because everyone's got their own opinion on the way things should go, but winning has to matter.
No, it does.
Yeah.
No, I like that, Pete. I really do.
Yeah. All right, so guys, there you have it. There's another amazing and fantastic segment of the fifth quarter between Pigskin Pete and Spencer from Rover Sports. Everyone, by the way, if you're watching this on howardsrock.net or on FanPride, go check out Spencer channel. It's called Rover Sports on YouTube. He covers everything. He covers NFL, he covers college football, he covers NBA, he covers college basketball. Am I missing anything here? What else do you cover?
Nah, I mean, that's pretty good right there. I'll take that.
Yeah, and he does a great job. He does a great job over there, and I'm a big fan of his, and go check him out. All right, Spencer. Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right.